King's Landing is a very important place in Game of Thrones, but what I find interesting is how often the writers go out of their way to tell us how bad it is. In Season 3, Loras Tyrell says this to Sansa about King's Landing. "It's terrible, isn't it? The most terrible place there is." Early in Season 7, a kind Lannister soldier says nearly the same thing to Arya about King's Landing. "Worst place in the world." Late in Season 7, Jon Snow sees King's Landing for the first time and asks, why would anyone want to live that way? And as early as Season 1, Ned told Arya what he thought of the city. "We've come to a dangerous place." So, what makes King's Landing so bad? One thing is that people there are greedy. Early in Season 7, those same kind Lannister soldiers tell Arya that the people who live there, they'd skin you alive if they could make 2 coppers off your hide. And then, when Arya goes to Hot Pie's tavern, she overhears merchants on their way to King's Landing. They're talking happily about how they could make money from others' suffering if Dany invades. Quote, "I hope it's true. If she lays siege to King's Landing, prices will triple, as long as we get back there before they start." Unquote. But even more so, the problem with King's Landing is that the people there are liars. In Season 2, Sansa says to Littlefinger, "King's Landing is my home now," and Littlefinger replies, "Look around you, we're all liars here." And then, in case we need to be reminded, Littlefinger repeats those words to Sansa in Season 4. "What did I once tell you about the capital? We're all liars here." Also in Season 4, Maester Aemon at Castle Black says that he knows when a man is lying because, quote, "I grew up in King's Landing," unquote. We know the show considers lying to be a big problem because in the last episode of Season 7, Jon Snow goes to King's Landing and says, "When enough people make false promises, words stop meaning anything. Then there are no more answers, only better and better lies, and lies won't help us in this fight." So, why is the show telling this to us so many times? Why does it want to make sure we know how bad King's Landing is? I think there's a very specific and interesting answer, which is why I'm making this video. Let's start with a line of dialogue that's spoken by Shae, the lover of Tyrion Lannister, early in Season 2 when she comes to King's Landing. Shae says, "This city stinks, like dead bodies." And Tyrion replies, "A bit corpsey, yes." That's interesting, wouldn't you agree? Why are they linking King's Landing with the words corpses and dead bodies? Well, it's not the only time a city is described that way. In Season 6, Tyrion and Varys discuss Meereen, and Tyrion says, "The city has come back to life." Later in the same episode, he says, "This city was ready to devour itself. Now it's like a man reborn." Here's the thing about a city coming back to life or being reborn. To come back to life, you first have to die. Just ask Jon Snow. So we're being told repeatedly that the people of a city are going to die, and even that they might be raised again afterwards. The main character who raises people after they die is the Night King, and it sure seems like his army will get to King's Landing sooner or later. If the people of that city all died, he might be able to raise their corpses and add them to his army. And that would be a really big deal. In the last episode of Season 7, the show takes pains to tell us 2 numbers: the population of King's Landing, which is 1 million, and the size of the Night King's army, which is 100,000. It's noteworthy that the population of King's Landing is 1 million, because in an earlier season, Jaime Lannister said that same population was 500,000 when he saved the city from the Mad King. That's not necessarily inconsistent. Theoretically, the city could have doubled in size over 20 years. But the writers cared enough about the number being 1 million now to tell it to us, even though they had told us a different number earlier. Why would it matter so much? I have a guess. Think about the wording I discussed earlier about a city coming back to life. If the Night King's army killed everyone in King's Landing, and then raised them as 1 million new dead soldiers, then it would make the dead army 10 times as big as it is now. That's a fearsome and potentially decisive problem for humanity. It might be the difference between survival and extinction. If so, it could potentially present our heroes with a horrifying moral dilemma in Season 8. Suppose the dead army is entering the city and will soon kill everyone there and raise them to aid in its cause of destroying all life. The only way to stop this might be to burn the bodies before they can be raised. The show reminds us about 1,000,000 times that when someone dies, you need to burn the body. But what if there weren't time for that after the people have been killed? Would you burn the bodies while they're still living? I know this sounds crazy, and I definitely think the writers would want to make the statement that it's wrong. But a major theme of Game of Thrones is the temptation to do what seems necessary, even if it's evil. In Season 1, Varys advises Robert Baratheon to murder Daenerys, saying this: "It is a terrible thing we must consider, a vile thing. Yet we who presume to rule must sometimes do vile things for the good of the realm." Again, let me be clear. I think the show is emphatically rejecting that line of thinking. It is presenting it as evil. That's basically the line of thinking that led to Melisandre murdering Shireen. But I also think the show wants to tempt viewers into that dangerous line of thinking by presenting it as necessary to save the world. If the alternative is everyone dying, then almost anything might seem justified. The right thing to do is to find an imaginative solution that doesn't require murdering innocents, but most characters may not be capable of that. Now let's get back to the idea of burning King's Landing. Notice that this is the exact reason that Jaime Lannister killed the Mad King. The Mad King was saying, "Burn them all." He wanted to blow up King's Landing with wildfire and kill everyone there. In Season 8, Jaime and the rest of the good guys may want to do the same thing the Mad King tried. But instead of doing it to bring vengeance and death, they'd be doing it to try to preserve life. Here's the interesting thing about burning King's Landing. Although it would be deeply immoral to do it, no matter what the goal is, the destruction of this particular city would fit with the main themes of the show, and especially with what Daenerys' character stands for. After Cersei blew up the Sept with wildfire, here's what was said about it by Tycho Nestoris, the guy from the Iron Bank. Quote, "Sometimes tragedies are necessary to restore order and rational leadership." Unquote. Clearly, the Sept fire didn't do that. Cersei became the leader. But if King's Landing blows up like the Sept did, and takes Cersei with it, that would pave the way for a better leader. I don't think Dany will be that leader in the end. I think it will be Sansa. But I do think that Dany represents a cleansing fire that can destroy the rot that has built up in the world. Here's what Dany says in Season 5 to Hizdahr zo Loraq about Meereen. Dany, "One day your great city will return to the dirt as well. Hizdahr, at your command. Dany, if need be. Hizdahr, and how many people will die to make this happen? Dany, if it comes to that, they will have died for a good reason." Dany's point is that Meereen, with its history of slavery and oppression, is a source of evil in the world. Think of how Arya wants to use fire to clean the Hound's wound, or how Melisandre, misguided as she is, always says that fire burns away sin and evil. The reason we keep hearing about the badness of King's Landing is that King's Landing represents one of the show's largest themes. This fictional world has been bad for a long, long time, and it basically needs to start over from scratch. I think Dany's role is to tear down the old bad world, and Sansa's role is to build a better one. That doesn't mean it's okay to destroy a city and murder its inhabitants, but it does mean that the destruction of this city could symbolically represent a new beginning. We get a major hint about this destruction from something Tormund says in Season 7. It involves a 4-letter word, so close your ears if that's not okay with you. Tormund says, "Down south, the air smells like pig shit." That term, and I'm about to repeat the word one last time, pig shit, has only been used twice in the show before, and both times were in Season 2, when Tyrion and Bronn used the term to refer to wildfire. So why would Tormund say it in Season 7? I suspect it's a very subtle hint that we're not done with wildfire. Indeed, we've been told that the wildfire beneath the Sept wasn't the only wildfire in King's Landing. In season 3, Jaime tells Brienne this about the Mad King. He had his pyromancer place caches of wildfire all over the city, beneath the Sept of Baelor and the slums of Gleebottom, under houses, stables, taverns, even beneath the Red Keep itself. In season 6, Tyrion spells it out even more fully when he tells Dany that the Mad King, quote, had caches of wildfire hidden under the Red Keep, the guild halls, the Sept of Baelor, all the major thoroughfares. He would have burned every one of his citizens, the loyal ones and the traitors, every man, woman, and child. And back in season 2, Tyrion says this about the caches of wildfire he sees in the room where the pyromancers are keeping it. The contents of this room could lay King's Landing low. Let me say that again. The contents of this room could lay King's Landing low. Those words tell us overtly that wildfire can destroy King's Landing. And that would explain why we hear so many times that King's Landing is evil and that fire can cleanse the moral rot. In addition, we're always told that bodies need to be burned to prevent them from rising to join the Night King's army, and that would fit with this too. Finally, just think about this from the perspective of the writers. The wildfire explosions in the Blackwater episode and in the episode where Cersei destroys the Sept were two of the most epic and memorable things that have happened on the show. The show is building towards something huge that would top even those explosions, and blowing up King's Landing would fit the bill. Let's end with a poem. When Jorah and Tyrion sail through Old Valyria in Season 5, Tyrion uses the word cities to describe what was wiped out by the fiery volcanic explosion known as the Doom. The Doom of Valyria occurred 400 years before the main plot. Clearly, it has some things in common with gigantic wildfire explosions, although the Doom was much more extreme. Here's the poem about the Doom that Jorah and Tyrion recite together. They held each other close and turned their backs upon the end. The hills that split asunder and the black that ate the skies. The flames that shot so high and hot that even dragons burned would never be the final sights that fell upon their eyes. A fly upon a wall, the waves the sea wind whipped and churned. The city of 1,000 years, and all that men had learned, the Doom consumed it all alike, and neither of them turned. So, we're being given an image of a city that dies in a gigantic fiery explosion. The word city is used, and in the end the words are, neither of them turned. Turned is a word that's often used to describe being raised from the dead by the White Walkers to join their army. So this poem suggests that if King's Landing does explode in flames, the people will not be turned, which means the explosion will deprive the Night King of 1 million new soldiers. And clearly Old Valyria was evil, just like Meereen and King's Landing. It was built on slavery and dark magic. The poem also tells us that even dragons burned, so maybe that's something to watch out for. Here's one final thought. It's not just Dany who's associated with wildfire. At the Blackwater, Tyrion used it to defend King's Landing in the name of Joffrey and Cersei. At the Sept, Cersei used it, and Lancel tried to stop her. And when the Mad King tried to use it, Jaime stopped him. Whenever there's wildfire, there are Lannisters. Maybe that's just a coincidence, but I doubt it. In the poem about Old Valyria, there are two people who held each other close and died in the flaming explosion. Jaime has said that he wants to die in Cersei's arms. Wouldn't it be fitting, even poetic, if Cersei died by the same means she used to kill so many people in the Sept? After all, Cersei tries to kill people in the same manner they have killed. Just ask Tyene Sand, who gets Cersei's poison kiss in Season 7. More important, what could possibly be a more fitting ending for Jaime? His greatest act was complicated, betraying the Mad King to save the city from a wildfire explosion. Now he could die by committing the exact opposite act, burning the city with a wildfire explosion in an effort to save humanity, and taking Cersei and himself with him. However it happens, I'd be willing to bet that King's Landing will get destroyed in a fiery explosion in Season 8.